First on film and entertainment, the whole team is together. Peter Krauss, delightful to have you back. Jacqui Hammerton, where have you been? We haven't seen or heard from you for at least a year or two. And Greg King, the team, absolutely. Let's start with you. Peter, you gave us a scare, but you're back and you're firing and you're fit, correct?
Pretty much so, yes.
Fantastic. Well, this is really nice. Jacqui, you've been a world traveller, correct?
Oh, yes, but I've spoken with you since then, Alex, so...
Have I forgotten that? You must.
Yes, you've forgotten that.
Oh, I have. Okay, well...
You're getting old, Alex.
Exactly. That's terrific. You know, it's the mind sort of wanders in all sorts of directions, Gregory, correct?
I wouldn't know.
He's not that old.
Not that old. Okay, Donald Sutherland's passing, extremely sad. One thing, I just thought he carried himself throughout his life remarkably. And, I mean, he was a very, very well-known figure around the world. For those who are delighted by cinema like we are, I don't know, it's, again, we talk about age, etc. He was 88 years of age. One thing that strikes me, and I suppose this is somebody who has become envious as I've become, what does one say about losing the thatching up top? Challenged in that area. He had a fine head of hair right throughout his life. And in fact, when I saw a shot of him from about 2 or 3 years ago, although he was snow white, it was extremely elegant. Now, why does that stand with me, Jacqui Hammerton?
Well, because you're jealous, but apart from that,
Yeah.
Snowy White, he also had a magnificent beard from time to time when it was called upon. So maybe that's why it's prominent for you, because it really stood out.
Oh,
And the voice of his, he often had that silky, sinister tone to his voice sometimes and played great villains.
he did play great villains, and I mean, it was relatively late. And some of the roles have been relatively recent for which he's known, and I think that that's part of his allure, that he spent...
One of the first times you noticed he was as oddball in Killer's Heroes, way back then.
Yes, but I was
as Hawkeye in MASH.
Yes, but I was also thinking about more recently President Snow, right? That's the thing, the Hunger Games franchise, which was huge. You know, that we're only talking about, that ended not even a decade ago. So, you know, this is a figure that, it's funny, I was thinking about this, I can't remember which actor I was hearing stories about, whether it was Sutherland or somebody else, that younger people used to go up to him and want him to sort of put on a nasty face when they took a photograph of him to reflect, you know, the nastier characters. Now that shows cut through. And I mean, he had such a prolific career, the number of movies that he made that really stood out. And I mean, you know, you're thinking about The Dirty Dozen and so on, and MASH and stories like that. And then, you know, you work through this and you go to, one of the movies that stood out for me was 6 Degrees of Separation. So a very prolific career, somebody highly regarded, and of course a Canadian, wasn't he? He was born in Canada, wasn't he? Exactly. So, you know, what stands out to you, Peter Krauss, about Donald Sutherland?
Well, he's very much a journeyman actor with 200 credits to his name, an incredible array of films he was in. Clute is probably one of his best films. But I also want to mention a film that's not that well known, a film called Disclosure, which a film made in the 90s with Michael Douglas and Demi Moore, and it was a film well ahead of its time because it looked at a computer organization with virtual reality, which for 1994 was quite amazing, and he was the head of that organization. And the film also dealt with sexual harassment. So he was very good at being cast in such a wide range of roles, some of which were quite unusual.
Very elegant as well, Greg, wasn't he? A statuesque, elegant person that really, he stood out. You knew that he was Donald Sutherland, and that you paid attention. That's how I recall him with a great deal of fondness. And you?
Yeah, but I like some of his more villainous roles, like in 1900 when he was the fascist leader who bashed the kid to death there in that film. I like that one. I remember him from The Dirty Dozen and MASH, of course. Clute,
Don't Look Now, one of his best films, I thought. The Eagle Has Landed, he had a great role in that one as well. But he also did comedy like National Lampoon's Animal House and those kind of films. But he often played villains like Eye of the Needle. He's also in films like Backdraft, JFK.
JFK was the one that, again, Oliver Stone movie that I really...
Time to Kill and Space Cowboys. The remade of The Italian Job. A lot of films, and The Horrible Bosses as well as in that. And lots of TV work. He made a few TV series like Dirty Sexy Money and appeared in Commander-in-Chief as well. So, yeah, prolific career. Some memorable roles, but a lot of shock in there as well. But as Peter said, he was a journeyman actor, just took on the roles and built up a body of work.
Well, in terms of, he's won a lot of awards, but I don't think he ever won an Oscar, did he?
Honorary. No.
Honorary, yeah, exactly.
Lifetime Achievement Award.
Yes. Which again, I thought he was highly deserving. You could have chosen any number of movies that could have won him an Oscar. He's not unusual in that regard. Jacqui, what are your recollections of Donald Sutherland, and how fondly did you regard him?
Well, not a lot of his films, to be honest, were really my favourite kind of films. So he wouldn't be up there for me as one of my, as being in my favourite films. However, he is an all-time Hollywood, old-school Hollywood gentleman, if you like.
Yes.
I think it's the kind of person that I liked. And I thought that he could always almost physically dissolve himself into a character very well. Even though he was quite imposing, having the height and a very angular face, so he was easy. He could actually, with quite a bit of makeup, whatever, change his hair, all that. He dissolved himself into a role very much, and that's what I think of. He has a very distinctive voice, and the other thing that was really appealing about him was his smile. He had a really nice, lopsided sort of smile.
He did, and as you rightly say, I mean, he won the 2018 honorary award at the Academy Awards, so it was terrific that during his life, at least I think he was very highly regarded by his peers, so that speaks volumes as well. It's interesting how friends of mine who are not really into cinema were quite sort of they expressed their sadness about his passing, whereas they perhaps wouldn't have commented on other people. So I think he had a strong impact on the world.
Also he was 88, Alex, so that's a good life and a good body of work, and he'll be a forever legend, really, won't he, of Hollywood, of old Hollywood.
I think that's absolutely true. I think he's one of the names that will stand out and stand for all time, and a number of the movies, of course. When you've got such a prolific career, Peter, with 200, as you say, credits to his name, there's going to be a lot of people who are going to appreciate his work long into the distance, aren't there?
Absolutely, yes. Such longevity and such a wide range of roles. And he also did win an Emmy Award, I must say, as well, for a television production. So apart from the honorary Oscar, he certainly was well recognised.
And his son, Kiefer, who posted on X, I thought his words were extremely well chosen and cut to the chase in a most effective manner, and very respectful, but it was a very pointed message and poignant message at that. So Vale, Donald Sutherland, and we talking about sort of franchise movies, and we talked about the Hunger Games that have had real impact. That sort of on JAir 88 FM. Let's turn our attention to what I would argue is the movie of the week, Despicable Me 4. Now, what a wonderful fourth movie in the franchise. I mean, okay, you've got Minions movies, but to me, this shows that sometimes when you have got a second, a third, or fourth movie, it can be just as good as the original, and how clever and creative and funny. And we went along on opening night, the media night, and a lot of the laughter came from adults who really appreciated what was going on here. And I think that speaks volumes. And it may be the first film in the collective, specifically the Despicable Me collective, for 7 years, but it only goes to show that in the intervening period, the filmmakers have continued to hone their skills. So, and wouldn't you love to be a voice talent in a successful series like this? I was thinking about this when I was thinking of Steve Carell, and Will Ferrell joins this one. So that's really it's a big thing. And of course, Kristen Wiig, they're the sort of three that stood out for me. But anyway, you've got Gru, the world's favourite supervillain turned anti-villain league agent, AVL, attending his, I think it's 1985 high school reunion, if I'm not wrong. And it's where his former nemesis, a character called Maxine Lamal, the voice of Will Ferrell, continues to mock him and lord it all over him. And much to his chagrin, the principal of the school they attended announces Maxime Lamal as the most successful student, and he presents him with a trophy. But of course, that's where the real skullduggery begins, because in his victory speech, Lamal outlines a nefarious plan in which he turns into this all-powerful mega cockroach. Who would have thunk it, yeah? But anyway, he's got a loyal cockroach following behind him, and he's ready to take over the world. Of course he is. Until Gru and members of the Anti-Villain League jump upon him and capture him and put him in jail. Problem is that he isn't going to be in prison too long before he's sprung, and he's got vengeance in mind. So to that end, the Anti-Villain League has to act swiftly to keep Gru and his family out of harm's way. So at short notice, they move to the picturesque town of Mayflower. And I speak about Gru, about his partner Lucy, played by Kristen Wiig, their daughters Margot, Edith and Agnes, and the baby, Gru Jr. So they're given false names. The parents adopt new fake occupations, and with them are their three closest minions who continue to get into all sorts of trouble. And so too the army of minions who are now all shifted to AVL headquarters. And among them, 5 so-called volunteers are turned into mega minions. It's sort of larger versions of minions who can get into even bigger mischief. And they're the ones who are called upon to help recapture Lamal. So Gruel is also prevailed upon to tone down his cranky, his irritable ways, shall we call them. And he tries to ingratiate himself to his uppity car dealer owner neighbour, Perry Prescott, the voice of Stephen Colbert, and Perry's snooty daughter Poppy, played with voice talent at least by Joey King. In fact, it's the daughter, that Poppy, who dreams of becoming a supervillain. She's obsessed with all things villainous, and she blackmails Gru into helping her pull off a heist at his old school. And while not all goes according to plan, Gru's real reckoning is yet to come. That's going to happen when, despite the Anti-Villain League's elaborate planning and with his femme fatale girlfriend Valentina in tow, Valentina voiced by Sofia Vergara, Lamal uncovers Gru's secret hideaway, their home in this picturesque town. So, delightful script, beautifully realised with a surfeit of colour and movement, hijinks aplenty, characters really, really well drawn, and there are laughs in almost every scene, and many stem from Gru's awkward relationship with his new son, who is a real mischief maker. And equally, the minions are frequently out of control, but continue to do their own thing with some hilarious consequences. I reckon this is the ultimate family film. You've got 2 really good family movies out, both of which are sequences or are series-based or franchise-based at the moment. So this is the second one. And to me, it's the ultimate family film, as I mentioned. Lots of mirth and merriment abound, perfect for children and adults alike. It's one you can really get your teeth into. And I love a movie like this. I mean, I thought it would be good, but I didn't think it would be great. And I consider this to be a great sequel, a really strong film that I would urge people to go along and see. I mean, it's an important film in that regard, and, fabulous that you've got 2 really good movies, the other one being Inside Out 2, playing at the cinemas as we speak. What did you think of it, Jacqueline?
I loved it too, Alex.
Oh,
Despicable Me 4. Well, there's
yeah,
not
you've seen all
really
the
much to... Yes, I have seen them all. It's all a little bit of a blur over the years as to, what I thought of each one specifically, but certainly don't have a memory of being disappointed in any of them. The only thing, if I'm going to allow one criticism of this film, I didn't find it quite as funny as you seem to have. For me, it wasn't much of a laugh out loud film. The dialogue, the scripting for me wasn't actually witty or funny, so I didn't burst out laughing. And I noticed this because there were a couple of times when I did. However, on the other side of the coin, it was endlessly entertaining and mildly amusing the whole time. Like, I didn't want to take my eyes off the screen. And some of that.
So hang on. Let's sort of dig down a bit here. So you said it was endlessly amusing, but you didn't find it funny. So hang on, how does that work?
Okay, so we're splitting hairs here, perhaps, but I didn't laugh out loud. Funny. I didn't laugh out loud at funny script lines, witty lines. Yes.
Okay.
And yet, it was what was happening on the screen was visually very amusing. There was a lot of slapstick and, of course, the minions. But
you went to opening night, didn't you? You went to the media.
No, I didn't actually, and I would like to say I went along all by myself at a very strange time for what could be a cartoonish young people's film at about 6:30 p.m. And in the cinema with me were several couples in their 20s.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was a fantastic audience for this film. And yes, at the times that it was funny, they were laughing out loud. They obviously loved it as much as I did. And I don't see who couldn't love this. It's bright and it's active and it's got fast action and it's got minions. The other thing I noted very much about this is that the main plot that you gave in a bit of detail there actually didn't seem to me to be a dominating, strong plot, because there were so many little subplots to entertain us along the way. And most of those subplots had to do with emotion and family and warmth. And, it's like the youngest daughter worrying about her little kid?
Yes.
Not remembering her when she came home. And it's about Gru trying to connect with Junior, who obviously had a stranger danger thing with his dad. And there were probably, a good 8 little mini subplots going along the way that kept us amused. And so nothing about it was too complicated, is what I'm saying. They didn't have to have a big plot that got complicated. It was just a baddie who was obviously a baddie, and he was a cockroach, and, villain versus good guy. So I like that.
When you think about it, you think about the fact that there's a cockroach at the centre of this, like a mega cockroach or whatever. You're thinking, oh, no, this could never work. And yet, this is where I really admire the writing. And we talk about this a lot on this.
I dispute your claim there. I think a villainous cockroach would totally work. I think it was a brilliant idea, whoever came up with that at the round table.
When I think of a cockroach, I think of a critter that I'm not particularly fond of as such.
Well, exactly. We just want to step on it and squash it.
But I mean,
it's a fine villain.
You hardly think about it in the same way that you would something really puffed up and powerful, though, do you? I'm sorry.
Well, a villain doesn't have to be puffed up and powerful. He's a try-hard, this villain.
Right.
And the other thing that being a cockroach allows for is the gadgetry behind its movements and its flight and its body. So it brought there was a lot of gadgets in this film, which is visually fantastic, and kids love that. So that worked really well.
Now, the other thing, we talk about the writing. My golly, to do it the way that they do, and then for the animators to achieve what they have done. And of course, the minions make it. The minions are just mayhem. The moment, and they've got to come up with smarter ways of doing it and sort of blowing them up, if you like. The mega minions, thought that was brilliant. So, I'm really pleased you enjoyed it as much as I did, Jacqui, because, we rarely agree totally on films, but we seem to here. Greg, you did see it at the media opening, and what I was getting at is I think that the audience around me, the sheer pleasure that I could see derived by them, sort of really also catapulted the film in my eyes the way that I've expressed. Were you cognizant of how enjoyable the film was for those around you?
Well, when you're seeing a film with an audience like that who are into it, it does sort of build and make it more enjoyable. But I had a little problem with the film. I thought it was a little too overcrowded plot-wise. There were so many subplots running throughout the film there. It was sort of a little bit hard to keep up with them all. But as usual, the Minions steal the show with their zany antics, their slapstick humour, all that sort of stuff. And I like the Mega Minions who had to learn how to harness their superpowers, which provided some big laughs as well as they learned how to use them properly. The film's been written by Mike White, who's better known for things like School of Rock, and the regular series writer Ken Dorio. But as I said, it's very busy with subplots. It feels like several short films thrown together to make a feature film there. I thought it failed to mine that fish out of water scenario, big laughs. There was a bit of a wasted opportunity there. But the theme of family and the subplot in which Guru attempts to bond with his baby son, I thought added some emotional heft to the material there. And it's got a great vocal cast, as you said. A lot of new characters brought into the mix as well, who are well brought to life there. Great vocal cast there. That's perfect entertainment for the whole family, especially with school holidays there. And younger audiences certainly did love it with its colour, its movement, and the antics of the Minions. But I feel that some older audiences may be a little bit jaded by it all by now. Probably not as fresh as it was when they first hit the screen, 14 years ago?
It's been a long time, but that's the beauty of something like this, that you get a new generation can appreciate it, and those that saw the first one, and you clamour almost to go along and see it because you know it's going to be done good, Greg.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's important. Peter, have you had the chance to catch up on it?
I have, yes. Look, I'm not as impressed as all of you are about the film. I think it's lost sight of its original franchise or its original plotline, and it's become sort of a watered-down film trying to introduce this version 4 as much humour and over-the-top sort of slapstick. And I don't know, it feels to me as if it might appeal to young children, but I just don't feel that it was a cohesive enough plot. I agree with Greg that it threw in far too many characters and far too many storyline threads, and I don't think all of them work particularly well. In fact, the Gru character has become a sort of a very much, as I mentioned, a watered-down sort of inverted commas evil type character who now has a family, and it's all very friendly, and in fact we have to have a cockroach as a villain because there's not much further that the writers have been able to go. And I must say the Minions annoy me. They dominate the film, and look, overall I think the writing is a bit of hit and miss. And I would have liked a much stronger, more cohesive story.
You are a recalcitrant individual. This is a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful movie. It is a joyful production. I can't see how you can't possibly see that, Peter.
Look, I'm just that curmudgeon that sees holes in plots.
Exactly. That's how I see it. Correct. Oh my golly! Wow. Jacqui, comment on Peter, please.
Oh, I'd be happy to. I think that the Minions, the one thing I thought about the Minions in this was they dominated less than I seem to remember in 2 or 3. I think suddenly everyone realised how popular the Minions were. And in those, at least 1 or 2 of those previous in the sequel, in the series, the Minions did dominate too much. But this, I thought they had a great role. There was a great balance in the way that they were brought out because their little, if we say activities, didn't impinge on the main story. They had their own, they were like sidekicks the whole way through, doing their own little bits and pieces that were just mildly amusing. And I also think, Peter, that Gru had gone from evil and he turned to good previously. So he's not a villain anymore. He actually works for the Anti-Villain League, which is why they were being put into a safe house and had to move away from their home when they were being pursued by the villains. So he isn't evil anymore. He's got family and he loves them and he wants to be a good guy now. So that's been the change, the shift in the series in his character. And if I could just also briefly say, with regards to the number of subplots, I mentioned that earlier as an example of something I loved about it. Greg and Peter have said there was too much of that. But from my point of view, apart from the fact that I actually really enjoyed it there, because they were all simple little snippets, kids are going to watch this over and over and over 100 times. So it's not too complicated or too busy or too much for them. They'll pick up on the threads right the way through. So I didn't have a problem with that.
And it's interesting because, Greg, you saw the Minions as dominating, whereas Jacqui didn't. So it's fascinating. We've all seen this same movie and we view it differently, so differently. That's not normal. That's not normal on this show because we're viewing the same product. And yet I suppose it's the way that we take to that product. Peter, as you say, this is not, I get the impression this isn't your cup of tea.
Well, and that's disappointing because I enjoy a lot of these animated franchises, and Inside Out 2 is an excellent example.
It's better than Inside Out 2, and I loved Inside Out 2 too. Yes, 2. I gave Inside Out 2 a 7.5. I gave the original Inside Out an 8. And I'm going to give this one, which is a wonderful movie and one of my year's favourite, I'm giving this an 8.5 out of 10. Jacqui, what about you?
Well, I was giving it between 7.5 and 8, and I think I'll go for the full 8 because I'm going to give that last little bit to the minion who gets stuck in the vending machine.
Yes.
But that's a great little subplot.
Oh, isn't it wonderful? And
I mean,
yes,
that's clever. That's lovely.
The pink part of that, if you know what I mean, where you just see the eyes. Sorry about the spoiler, folks, but that was just priceless, and it's part of the trailer, and I just think it's gorgeous. It's all warm and mushy stuff. Greg, what about you? Despicable Me.
6 out of 10.
What? You're going to only muster a 6?
Yep.
Oh, golly. PG rated 95. Peter, do I need a drum roll or not?
Maybe not, but I agree with Greg, actually. I gave it 6 out of 10 as well.
Where's your inner child, Peter?
I left it at the cinema door.
Exactly. Well, it does appear that way. So, hang on. Greg, do the sums, please. 668, right?
That's
668, right? 668, 20. And then, hang on, is that 20? Yes, it is. And then 8.5. So 28.
8.5 divided by 4 is 7 and a bit.
Okay.
Average.
Well,
is that the technical result, Greg?
Yeah, that is. So, 7 and a bit is better than average, isn't it, Jacqui?
Oh, definitely.
I reckon it's extraordinary, and I wouldn't be surprised if this is in my top 10 movies of the year. That's how highly I regarded Despicable Me 4. What about you, Jacqui? No, you need...
No, I don't think it'll be in my top... it could be there somewhere. But what I think is it's going to be one of those films that kids will just revisit for years. It's going to be a part of the childhood thing, Despicable Me.
The childhood thing, exactly. Well, I know, Jacqui, you're going to push off. We hopefully will catch up with you very, very soon. Thank you for your insight. Enjoy the week. And I want to move on J-Air 88 FM. By the way, if you want to subscribe, $54 a year, just go to j-air.com.au and you are supporting community radio, which we love. The other thing I wanted to talk to you about is the Sitting Duck. Now, Peter, you've seen that
yes.
as well, have you not? And when did you see it? Did you see it recently or
I saw it during the French Film Festival.
That's what I thought. Now, so I never know, and I suppose this is the case. Palace does a wonderful job with its film festivals. I never know which films are going to be sort of make general release thereafter and which ones are not. I wonder how. Do you have any insight into how they determine that? Because I mean, is it on ticket sales? Is it on? Is it just luck of the draw? Any insights?
Not necessarily. There are issues related to who the distributor is, and I think this might be a Palace film. And they bought quite a few of the films from the French Film Festival, and also it depends on the star power. And of course, Isabelle Huppert has a lot of star power.
In fact, we just received an invite yesterday for another movie with Isabelle Huppert in Japan.
Yes, Sydney in Japan, which also was part of the French Film Festival.
Ah, was it indeed? Right, got it. Well, okay, The Sitting Duck is a couple of hours. It's 2 hours and 2 minutes. It's rated M, and it is a political thriller concerning a trade union official and whistleblower. She was not believed after a violent personal attack. Now, I didn't know this, because I don't read about movies until I've seen them and I've actually written things up. But once I'd written up my review and started sort of talking about it, I realised it was based on fact, and that elevates it in my eyes, because it fact is often stranger than fiction, and you can't quite believe that this was actually based on a real situation, a court case, and so on and so forth. Now, the central figure is Maureen Kearney, played by Huppert, who had a hood put over her head. She was bound, she was raped, she was cut, and this was the 17th of December, 2012. Now, I don't imagine it's identical to the real story, because I think the real story occurred in Belgium, didn't it, Peter, as well? That's my understanding. I'm not sure whether you're over that or not. But
I think that's true, yes.
Yeah. Anyway, Maureen Kearney worked for a company called Areva, Areva, a French multinational specialising in nuclear power. So a change of leadership at the firm ahead of the 2012 French election brought with it extra pressure on this woman, on Kearney. And she vowed to stay on, and she was duly elected to represent Areva's then 50,000 workers for a sixth term, which is no mean feat. And unfortunately, she didn't trust the new Areva head, Luc Oursel, played by Ivan Attal. Vindication of her suspicions came quickly when she was presented with a damning document that pointed to this French conglomerate selling out to the Chinese. So tens of thousands of Areva jobs are on the line. But when she tried to raise this matter with political heavyweights, and I'm talking about heavyweights in politics in France, her overtures weren't welcomed. And the Areva head also made it clear that she should back off, while she was repeatedly threatened and intimidated. And then came this physical attack that I referenced at the start, towards the end of 2012, in which, among other depravities, she had the letter A carved into her stomach, suggestive of Areva. Now, in a shocking turn of events, the upshot was that with no evidence, no witnesses, no DNA, this woman, Maureen Kearney, went from being a victim to a suspect. And her personal history was trawled over, and she took hit after hit. Nevertheless, over the ensuing 6 years, with her husband Giles Hugo, played by Gregory Gadabay, behind her, she fought an often difficult campaign for justice. So hers is and was a most unusual case, and it was ripe to be made into a movie. When you hear that backstory, sitting there watching events unfold, I was incredulous. And it's been adapted from a 2019 book of the same name, The Sitting Duck, by an investigative journalist called Caroline Michelle Igueri. It's directed by Jean-Paul Salome, and he wrote the screenplay alongside Fadette Drouard. It really is a film about power and control, and at its core is skullduggery and misogyny and sexual assault. I thought Isabelle Huppert was a standout as Kearney, a woman of fierce determination and also vulnerability. It's an interesting combination, and we learn more about that vulnerable side as the movie progresses. Suffice to say that Huppert carries herself with a lot of dignity and poise, and Gadabay brings stoicism and warmth and good humour to his representation of Kearney's husband. Now, Mara Tarquin, chip off the old block, playing Kearney's demonstrative and argumentative daughter Fiona. The pair often don't see eye to eye, but they clearly care about each other. Ivana Tal is fiery as the Arriva boss, fed up with Kearney's meddling, and Pierre I'll try and get this right, Deladon-Champ portrays the policeman heading up the investigation as a man copping pressure from his higher-ups, pressure to get a conviction. So there are many threads to this script, and the movie does require concentration to take it all in. But if you do, there is payoff and there is satisfaction. I really appreciated the twists, Peter. I was gripped and I longed to find out more. What was being revealed had impact, and I felt my outrage growing. So the fact that it's drawn from reality, as I say, gives it extra bite. I thought it was a strong movie. What did you think of The Sitting Duck?
Yes, I was very impressed by this film. It reminded me a lot of the film Silkwood.
Yes.
Yeah, that sort of background. It's interesting, the title of the film, La Syndicaliste, actually translates as the trade unionist. And I think to some extent that might have been a better title than The Sitting Duck. But nevertheless, I like the thriller aspect of the film.
She was a sitting duck in terms of, the position that she was in, and she was in the firing line.
Yes.
Yeah, but I take your point. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So look, it's a really well developed thriller, and it's interesting. The original character Maureen Kearney, who is represented here, was Irish. And then lived in France for many years and became a trade unionist.
Was there an Irish? Am I wrong in thinking there was one character or whatever that was Irish? Or I can't remember now that I've seen it a while ago now. But I for some reason that Irish stands out in my head. Was there?
Yes.
Yes.
I think you're right. I think there was an Irish character related to her background and heritage and so on. So, yes, absolutely. So, yes, this is a finely developed thriller with some twists and turns in the story. And the question always is whether to believe the central character and the assault that was permeated on her. And I think it's because of that it's quite a compelling film. And Isabelle Huppert is, as always, superb in the central role. Although I must say that whoever was behind her makeup made her look very white and pasty, which I thought was a bit odd.
She was flawless. Her skin was flawless. So, I mean, I really noticed she looked really young. So if makeup can do that, that's a nice thing.
Yes.
Honestly, I looked at her skin and I'm thinking, my golly, a porcelain doll. So
yes.
Yeah, yes, it really did strike me. She is a wonderful actor. No question about it. I mean, it's such an amazing situation where you don't leave DNA, where, from being somebody who, it's funny. Funny is the wrong word. It's very sad. I spoke to an extended family member who happens to be a policewoman in Victoria, and this is going back a couple of years, and it really stood out in my mind, especially given what we're talking about here about a woman who's sort of had a sexual assault and is not believed. How few people actually go through, and we're talking specifically women here, but how few women actually want to go through the process because they are seen as the accused rather than the person who has had a crime perpetrated upon them, and how difficult it is to, not in a circumstance like this, but generally to get a conviction in a sexual assault charge. I mean, this is something that we talked about. I remember at a particular event, and it really stayed with me. And I mean, obviously, the burden of proof needs to be there. I'm not suggesting otherwise, but there are many people who choose not to report it because, if you like, they have to relive the trauma, and it's a question of what the lesser of two evils is. So all of those things were brought up for me, Peter, and you can imagine how would you feel? You'd be outraged, and at some point you'd feel battered and beaten down because the world seems to be against you. I mean, that's the whole point of the premise.
Look, you're absolutely right. The victim, as being accused of perpetrating evidence that may or may not be true. And yes, absolutely. And I think this film demonstrates that very well indeed. And it's interesting. I think the real life character was probably around about 70 at the time that all of this happened to her as the trade unionist. And we mustn't forget that there is a big political conspiracy that is behind this film, as she was a whistleblower, and the whole aspect of nuclear power and losing so many jobs, which she was trying to defend, and of being sold out to China. Look, there are so many aspects to the film which I thought were very impressive.
Greg, off the top, and I haven't given you any sort of notice about this at all, there are a couple of things that Peter spoke about there. Films about whistleblowers and films about sexual assault where victims are not believed. I'm just thinking over the years, we've seen quite a few movies about whistleblowers.
The Insider with
Russell Crowe, that's the one I was thinking of when I mentioned that. That's one. I mean, I suppose there must have been quite a few others, and then others about sexual assault. Any others that any of us can think of that spring to mind? Not necessarily parallels with this. Just
there was an Australian one with Deborah Lee Furness from the late 80s.
I don't recall what that was, but I mean, it's
Peter would probably know it off the top of his head.
Peter, do you...
Yeah, I remember it from the late 80s. I'm trying to think of the title.
I'm quickly Googling it as we speak.
No, that's all right. We'll talk about amongst ourselves while we do that. But obviously these are topics that are ripe and to be made into movies. And it's because of if you like, almost the world needs whistleblowers because otherwise things are swept under the carpet. But if you
Shame film.
Sorry?
Shame was the film.
Shame.
Yes.
That was a brilliant movie. Brilliant film. Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
But I mean, the world needs whistleblowers, and yet the risk that a whistleblower takes is enormous, absolutely enormous, because believed, whether there's a reputation there. It's interesting when somebody is sacked from a job or leaves under bad circumstances or whatever, and then they reveal all about their employment. It's seen as sour grapes, and yet there may be a lot behind. Not everybody leaves. They may leave under sort of tenuous circumstances, but it's fascinating that most of the time, many companies and so forth, you're almost signing an agreement that you can't speak to the media, you can't speak badly about a company or whatever, and yet bad practices are still rife in a large number of organisations. Clearly, otherwise we wouldn't need whistleblowers and the work practices and so forth. I want to see more movies like that, Peter, quite frankly.
Absolutely. There is a film called The Whistleblower, I remember, with Michael Caine, which dealt with that. And there's another Isabelle Huppert film called Elle, where she was a victim of an assault and not believed.
Wow. Okay. Well, look, let's go to the scores for The Sitting Duck. I'm going to give it a 7.5 out of 10. Peter?
Yeah, I really liked it. 7 out of 10 from me.
Fantastic. And Greg, hopefully you can catch up on it in time. Now, let's talk about the Spanish Film Festival. Have you seen any films in it, Greg, or not yet?
Not yet, no.
Not yet? Okay. So, again, one of the many film festivals that are out and about, and virtually each week we have another one. But, this is one of the more dominant and prominent ones. We saw, Peter, the central film in the festival, The Teacher Who Promised the Sea, and it turns back the clock to the horrors of the murderous Franco regime. Highly personal search involved in this one, conducted in 2010, and it's again based on fact. So that search involves a dying man's granddaughter who's desperately looking for her granddad's father. So that's her great-grandfather. And the hunt will see the single mother, played by Leia Costa, travel to a site where mass graves have been uncovered. And there she meets and liaises with, subsequently, an elderly man who knew her grandfather. So the movie, The Teacher Who Promised the Sea, juxtaposes revelations from 2010 with a dramatisation of events that occurred between 1935 and 1939, right? So World War II type territory. Now, the major focus is on a gentle and caring teacher who dared to defy the establishment. And his name is Antoni. And he's hired to teach in a small, isolated village in Spain. And it's there that he establishes a delightful, intense, and honourable relationship, and I stress the word honourable, with his students. These are boys and girls aged from 6 to 12. So he's an atheist, and his first order of business is to remove the cross from the wall of the schoolroom, which immediately puts him offside with the surly local parish priest. Parents, well, they are suspicious of his unorthodox teaching methods, which he has brought with him from France. And he creates magic with his students through the use of a small printing press, which enables them to create and craft their own little books. And to the children's wonderment and excitement, he promises to take them on an end-of-year trip to, quote, see the sea, S-E-E-S-E-A, see the sea for the first time in their lives. So with the best will in the world, though, expectation will turn to tragedy. So this won the Audience Award at this year's Gaudi Awards, which are celebrated annually in Barcelona. And it's quite an emotionally wrought drama. There is an archaeological dig where bones are uncovered, and that starts the film. It's the, pardon me, flesh and bones manifestation of that, which takes one back much later in the movie. And its impact is very strong. It's immense, in fact. The political undertones of the film are apparent throughout, but the arrival of Franco's forces in this sleepy village reveals the depth of fear and hatred felt at the time. And I wondered, my mind actually wandered back to the extraordinary Academy Award-winning film Life is Beautiful back in 1997. And so much promise is taken away with utter brutality, which was the essence of that movie as well. I reckon the actor Enrique Augier does a really fine job as the idealistic teacher who offers so much. He brings the sympathetic edge to his portrayal. And a pall hangs over Leia Costa's role as the granddaughter as she uncovers clues to a dastardly family story. The director, Patricia Font, brings into sharp focus the shocking history of a nation that lost so many in appalling circumstances. I'm talking about the Franco regime, one still dealing with its traumatic past. So the centerpiece film at the Spanish Film Festival, it requires a bit of concentration to follow, but it's well worth a look, Peter, isn't it?
I was very impressed by this film because it looked at the issue that a lot of Spanish filmmakers are still dealing with, which is, of course, the Spanish Civil War and the anti-communist approach that was taken in the 30s to weed out the communists, which suffered so significantly. Just like German filmmakers are still dealing with, in many of their films, with the Nazi period. So, yes, this one is a really well-framed story about the search for the past and for evidence of the brutality and the deaths that occurred during the 30s under Franco. Really well-developed story, and I love the father-son relationship in the 30s, where the father didn't see any value in education at all for his son, and blocked a lot of that for the teacher, and the teacher having to try to work around that, and yet other children, other students were very keen to have this opportunity to write their own stories, which of course would be anathema to the Franco era, because you have to submit to what was appropriate at the time, and anyone who's tinged with the idea of being a communist or questioning the regime would come into a great deal of trouble and eventually death in many respects. So, yes, very impressive film. Certainly one of the highlights of this year's Spanish Film Festival.
7 out of 10 for mine, Peter. And you?
I actually gave it 8 out of 10.
Ah, very good indeed. Now, look, before we go, I wanted to mention now this. You only have one more opportunity to see this, but I saw this. It was because there were so many other things on. I wish I'd seen it earlier. It's Shrapnel. That's the name of it. It's a show at 45 Downstairs, 45 Flinders Lane, and it's put on by Kadima Yiddish Theatre. And few are as fearless in opening up their lives, warts and all, as is Namibian-born Natalie Gamsu, who lives here in Melbourne. And she's a singer, she's an actor, she's a cabaret performer. She moved to Australia in 2003, studied drama at the University of Cape Town, and she's worked all over the world. I mean, she lifts the lid on her experiences. She gives us her thoughts and feelings. In this particular one-woman show with a pianist, in addition, who fires more than the odd angry shot. And she's delightfully engaging. She's a really entertaining artiste who can do it all. She can sing beautifully with perfect diction. She's got heart. She's got conviction. She can deliver evocative stories, and there's many of those. And she has us eating out of the palms of her hands, hanging on to her every word. And the opening number that she sings actually highlights this litany of place names, many of which she's performed in, and the latter includes Chicago and LA, London, Berlin, Amsterdam, and Johannesburg. For more than a decade, actually, before making Australia home, she lived and worked in New York City. This time, her stage is 45 Downstairs, which I mentioned at the outset, arranged cabaret style with patrons seated at small tables up front and on tiered seating behind. And she's accompanied by the pianist and musical director Mark Jones. She wrote the show with Ash Flanders. Direction is from Stephen Nicolazzo and Ash Flanders. So she regales us with her love of all things Spanish, including the fire and passion in flamenco dancing, and that starts with her ugly crying, as she calls it, alongside her husband Julia in Barcelona. And she talks about her Jewish roots, her immediate family who lived in a constant state of tsuris, and being forever fat-shamed by her mother. For those who don't know, tsuris is sort of a Yiddish word for distress. That's one definition anyway. Now, among her most memorable anecdotes is when she downed a whole plate of fudge complete with red syrup that she found in the fridge. Of course, there is a sting in the tail, which I'm not about to spoil, but humour and pathos are comfortable bedfellows for Gamsu, her lively offerings pouring out at pace. And she worked in intimate apparel in Manhattan, and she met celebrities like Patti Smith and Jennifer Lopez and Britney Spears, and she also became acutely aware of the feel-good factor in sizing and the roles she was expected to play in terms of fitting out her patrons in that particular role. And she earlier had attended boarding school where there was a waste not, want not attitude, and her weight inevitably ballooned. And her mother, Judy, who, like her father, David, she called by her first name, addressed that each time she returned home, which she found exhausting because basically, she was yo-yoing in terms of weight, and her mother was constantly sort of telling her that less is best. So, look, she snubs plastic surgery, a trait that was adopted by some of her nearest and dearest, while lunch with Granny was a bit of an ordeal that left her with bad stomach aches. It's an amazing production. It really is something mighty special. I thought it was fabulous, absolutely fabulous. And, even dark thoughts that were in her life, and she'd known a number of people who'd committed suicide, one who even told her where to stab herself if she were to follow suit. So she got married so she could stay in Australia. Her honeymoon, they left her less than impressed. So too working in customer care. So a very full and diverse life thus far. She's not one to hold back, and nor would we ever want her to. And lots of mood-changing lighting and great sound design showcases what a supreme talent we have in our midst in Natalie Gamsu. Really strong, handful of songs in Yiddish, Spanish and English, and the show's a rare and fulfilling treat. And tonight is your last opportunity to see Shrapnel. So please, folks, don't hesitate to do so. Really, really enjoyed it. Peter, thank you so much for your time. Gregory King, likewise. And I wish you well, and we will do it all again very soon. You've been listening to First on Film and Entertainment.